Why did the Karen Reed trial mistrial? And what is a mistrial? I'm sure some of you who've been following the Karen Reed trial have noticed that the jury couldn't come to a decision, so they mistried. And a mistrial is just basically a reset button on a jury trial. What that means is that you're going to have to do it again if the prosecution decides to prosecute once again. Now, I've had cases that have mistried, and I've had cases where I've had to retrial. And I'll explain some considerations when this happens. The first thing is sometimes when there's a mistrial, the prosecution doesn't always prosecute. A lot of times they don't bother prosecuting because the memories of witnesses has faded. Some witnesses have died. Sometimes their whole angle is completely exposed, so they don't want to bother. Sometimes the victims, if there are victims, in this case, the person's dead, but if the victims survive, they don't want to be re-traumatized by reliving the process. But in the Karen Reed trial, the prosecutors have decided that they're actually going to go forth and they're going to have another trial. Now, that brings another consideration for the defense. Defense have a right to essentially trial by ambush, not officially, but it kind of becomes like that because you don't have to disclose very much. Now, there are exceptions to that, so that's not a hard and fast rule, but oftentimes the prosecution doesn't see your defense until you go before the court and you call your evidence. And once you've done that once, then the element of surprise that you may possess in the second trial, that might not be there. So what I've noticed defense lawyers do, and this is a strategy that I frequently consider, is that if I'm going to have to retry a matter, maybe you could switch things up again a little bit. So for an example, if in the first trial you called your accused person or the accused testified, in the second trial, you might reconsider that and say, we're not going to do this time, or vice versa. If they were silent in the first trial, then at the second trial, it might be a consideration to call them, especially if it was a mistrial, because if the jury couldn't come to a consensus as to guilt or innocence without hearing from your guy, that is the accused person, it might be helpful if when you retry it, you call them to testify and they could explain what happened or whatever. But a huge problem or a huge challenge for the defense if the prosecution decides to retry the case is the fact that you lose the element of surprise. Now, another thing is delay. Right? Delay is something to be considered, and sometimes it takes too long for matters to get to trial. So if the matter is taken too long, the rights to trial without delay could be compromised based on how things play out. So what's going to go on in the Karen Reed trial? I don't know. It's going to be retried at this point, and there's going to be a need for a jury to be unanimous to come back with a decision. What do you guys think about the Karen Reed trial? Were you following it? Do you think she's guilty or innocent? Let me know the most damning pieces of evidence that you thought existed in the trial in the comments below.